Hello and welcome to the Advanced Clinical Educator Training, or ACE training. This training is delivered collaboratively by the University of Chester, the University of Central Lancashire and Manchester Metropolitan University. My name is Laura Graham and I'm one of the lecturers and practice placement facilitators at the University of Chester. As part of the ACE training, we ask that you complete 5 online bite-sized training videos prior to booking on to our in-person training session with us. Today's bite-sized video is all about practice-based learning. It'll last roughly about 30 minutes long and it has 2 main themes. The first, looking at promoting active learning with our learners out on placement, and the second, looking at placement styles and alternative styles of placement. So let's get started. To start with, we're going to have a little look at active learning. And actually, we probably need to start with what is active learning? When we think of teaching or learning, we often think about traditional learning or didactic learning, where somebody is either stood at the front of a classroom and provides information to students, or information is given to students verbally and they're asked to learn it. So they're told the information, they're asked to memorise this information, and then they're asked to relay this memorised information either in an exam or demonstrate it in, say, a dietetic consultation, for example. Active learning is very different. Active learning is designed to be a lot more interactive and a lot more engaging for our learners. Active learning is essentially providing our learners with a problem or with a scenario and asking them to solve this problem by applying what they already know. So, application of knowledge to a problem. And often active learning is encouraged to be collaborative. So we encourage students to work in pairs or with peers in a small group to solve this problem together and learn from one another. And the reason we promote active learning is because we know that learning via problem solving and learning actively creates higher student engagement. It means that students are a lot more engaged when they're learning, and hence it means they're more likely to retain the information that they've learnt and be able to go on and apply their learning to various scenarios throughout their career and throughout their practice as dietitians. We're creating lifelong learners. And so that's why we're so keen to promote active learning within dietetics and within dietetic training, both at the university and whilst they're out on placement with you. And here's just a few examples of how we promote that at the university. So we use simulated environments, so that can include ward simulations, clinic simulations, flat simulations. And the idea is that we try to create an environment that's as realistic as possible for students to problem solve, to have a go and to practice with lots of different scenarios. Often we will split students off into small groups or groups of 3, and we will encourage this PAL or CLIP model. So peer assisted learning, PAL, or CLIP, learning collaboratively in a group on placement. So we're encouraging them to work in small groups or pairs and to provide one another with peer feedback and to learn from one another. So we might ask one student to act as the dietitian, we might ask one student to act as the patient, and we might ask one student to act as the observer or the person that provides feedback. And often we will ask real service users to come in and create a lot more of a realistic environment for our students. But we're essentially asking students to learn and apply what they know to a scenario or a problem and learn actively. So as I say, we have these ward and these clinic simulation environments. We're also looking into creating flat or community style environments in the same way. And we've also got our VR caves, our virtual reality caves that we're hoping to really utilise a lot more within dietetic training and create that real immersive learning environment so that it feels as realistic as possible for them to really problem solve before coming out on placement with you. And as well as these simulation environments, we also encourage what we call a flipped learning model within the classroom as well. We provide the students with a problem or a scenario, and we encourage them to try and get to the answer independently in pairs, in small groups, or as a class, and to really problem solve as opposed to just being given the information in that didactic approach. And we know that dietetic placements have really evolved and changed over the years. We know that previously dietetic placements were very long, extended periods of time out on placement, and it was very much a one-to-one approach. You had one student, one supervisor, and that student was often with that supervisor for the whole placement for often about 40 weeks. That then began to evolve, and we realised that actually it's important for students to get a much broader experience whilst they're out on placement and have a lot more variety within their placement. And so that's when we split placements into 3. You might know it as placement A, B and C, or how it is now referred to as P1, P2 and P3. Placement 1, placement 2, placement 3. And roughly first placement or placement A was about 4 weeks. The second and third placement were roughly about 12 weeks. I know it can differ slightly university to university. But we split those placements into 3 to provide more variety and more experience, allowing students to experience lots of different settings and areas of dietetics. And now it's evolving even further. We're looking a little bit more at utilising ward simulations and virtual reality prior to coming out on placement so that they're feeling more prepared and they've had a go at practising and problem solving in a sort of a virtual way, as realistic as possible prior to coming out on placement. And instead of following that one-to-one supervision model, we're now really encouraging and utilising group learning models. We're encouraging PAL or peer-assisted learning, sending learners off in pairs, going onto the wards and trying to problem solve together, gathering information on a patient together, figuring out what they might want to find out or speak to the patient or the nurse about, and coming back to their supervisor and checking that they're going down the right lines. The same with a clip or a group model, going off in small groups, maybe 3 or 4, gathering as much information as they can on a couple of patients, figuring out where their gaps are and what direction they want to take that consultation in, and again linking in with their supervisor as needed to check that they're going down the right lines. So placements are very much evolving. We're wanting more variety, more experience, and we're encouraging that collaborative learning, working with their peers and learning from their peers. And this is a model that a lot of other professions use. We know that the physiotherapists and the doctors use this regularly within their learning and within their practice placements. And within literature, it's very highly recognised. It's seen as creating a lot more engagement and creating lifelong learners. So I've just got a quick video that I'm going to play to introduce us a little bit more to practice-based learning, alternative styles of practice learning, looking at how placements are evolving and adapting, and then we'll go in and we'll have a little look at placement styles and how we can perhaps adapt our placements to support learners a little bit more effectively and potentially increase our capacity for learners as well. So I'll just play this now.
Students are the lifeblood of our health and social care services. They are our future workforce, and together we need to care for them so they can care for us. We need to provide them with the best possible learning experience, helping to realise their potential as confident, flexible healthcare professionals, equipped for today's health and care workplaces. That's why we're working together to promote, innovate and diversify practice-based learning across the NHS and the wider system. The practical experience gained by AHPs varies by allied health profession, but always has the aim of preparing students for practice and fostering a sense of excitement about their future careers. Practice-based learning is moving towards a more blended approach, which utilises innovative models and new methods, such as simulated environments, providing guided interactive experiences, technologically enabled care services, where students can engage with service users over video calls, exposure to new learning environments to help understand health inequalities and the needs of different areas of practice, multi-student supervision models, where students work in pairs or in groups with a supervisor, promoting a culture of coaching and supported learning, on-site university clinics, where students can practice under supervision to provide health and care services, and practice-based learning in non-patient facing areas such as leadership, education, public health and research. Practice-based learning is recognised in the NHS long-term plan as a vital investment in the future NHS and social care workforce. The plan drives a vision of 21st century care which requires an all-rounded, skilled and flexible AHP workforce. This blended approach allows students to build skills across different competencies at an early stage in their careers. And by providing aspiration for a varied career ahead, we can improve retention. Supporting students with practice-based learning enriches the experience of everyone in the team by bringing new perspectives and energy, improving service delivery, and sharing cutting-edge approaches. Practice-based learning shapes our next generation of AHPs. Together, we're training the future workforce. Health Education England provides a wealth of resources to assist in supporting practice-based learning, both now and into the future, as practice-based learning continues to evolve. To learn more about AHP practice-based learning, visit our website today and help to shape and inspire the next generation of AHPs.
Okay, so that was just a quick video introducing us to practice-based learning and how it's potentially evolving and changing, and how we can support our learners going forward. And I know that video mentioned the NHS long-term workforce plan, and within that plan it's really asking us to increase our AHP workforce, our allied healthcare professional workforce, over the next few years. So it's really wanting us to increase the number of dietitians that we're training, and that we're having out in practice. But of course that comes with difficulties, and we already struggle to reach the number of placements that we need for our dietitians, without increasing student numbers as it is. So we're really looking at how we can evolve and adapt our placements, our practice placements, to support this vision, to try and increase placement capacity and allow us to get more students and more learners through the dietetic training, so that we can have more dietitians out in practice. And so that's really a big reason why a lot of our dietetic placements are adapting and changing a little bit, and why we're potentially looking at utilising new models, so things like our peer-assisted learning model and our CLIP model, our collaborative learning model, to try and allow placement providers to take on more students but without putting additional pressures onto your teams. So yes, you might have another student to what you normally would have, but you can send those students out in pairs and they can learn together, so you're not having to find two areas that can take the two separate students at once. So I'm going to talk you through that a little bit more, and I know the video mentioned blended learning placements, so I'm going to have a little look at that with you as well. So when we talk about a blended learning placement, it essentially means that we're going to incorporate a slightly different area of dietetics into placements. So traditionally placements are extremely clinical. Students are asked to go on the wards in clinics, deliver group education sessions. It's all very much patient-facing, patient-centred, and clinical. blended learning placements are looking at those other areas that we work within as a dietitian, and actually allowing our students to experience those and see what that's all about, and see what kind of the life of a dietitian involves. What does the role of a dietitian actually involve? Because yes, we are very clinical a lot of the time, but there are other aspects to our role alongside our clinical work. Often we run audits, we look at service evaluation, service development, etc., alongside our clinical work. And so it's all about getting our students involved in these areas, in what we call a little project alongside their clinical development on placement. And so often these blended learning placements might include students spending, say, 3 to 4 days of the week in their traditional clinic environment, going onto the wards, running a clinic or being part of a clinic, etc. And then they might have 1 or 2 days of that week allocated to working on a regular project, and it can be a mini project or it can be a long extended project that spans placement over placement and continues and is ongoing, and students can kind of pick that up as they come on placement with you. And so I've got a bit of an example timetable here for a blended learning placement. You can see this is just 1 week, so I've just picked week 4 of a placement timetable here, and we can see that I've split the days into morning sessions and afternoon sessions. So you can see for this specific timetable example that on a Monday the student would be working on a project, and I'm going to give you some examples of what these projects could be on the next few slides. But for this student on a Monday, every Monday, they work on their project, and it's usually independently, perhaps with a project supervisor giving guidance as needed. And they can very much do that remotely off-site if space is a bit of an issue on placement. Particularly office space, I know, can be really tricky. Actually saying to that student, you can go off and work on your project in the hospital library or from home, or wherever they feel they are best placed to work on that project. And then you can see that they've got their traditional kind of clinic time, Tuesday to Thursday. So this student is on the wards on a Tuesday. They have their general clinic on a Wednesday and their clinic admin and prep on a Wednesday afternoon. And then they're back on the wards all day Thursday. You can then see that Friday they've got another half a day's worth of project time where they might meet with their project supervisor to go through where they're up to and what they've been doing on the Monday, and then they would work on their project for the rest of the morning before having their end of week review and their study time in the afternoon. So you can see that actually the student is still getting a good chunk of clinical work, and it's regular each week. But they've also got that regular protected time to work on a project, on an area that's different to their clinical work, and they're getting some experience in a different area. As I said before, it could be something like audit, supporting with doing a mealtime audit or a record keeping audit or something like that. And so actually they're getting a bit more variety, a bit more experience, but it's also taking pressure off your team as well. So they're working independently on a Monday. They don't need a staff member to be with them. They don't need an area within the hospital to be in if we don't want them to. So they can do that very independently, and it's actually taking pressure off your team on that Monday and that Friday. So you're only really supporting the student or needing a student supervisor, if you like, Tuesday to Thursday. So hopefully allows you to potentially increase your placement capacity. You might find that you can take on additional students, and you would obviously alternate their project days. So this student might have their project day on a Monday and a Friday, and your second student might be in on a Monday and a Friday and have their project time midweek. So really you only ever have the one student in the office or with a supervisor at one time, and so it's a little bit more manageable if you are a smaller team. So that's just an example of a blended learning timetable that we could consider trialling or adopting going forward. And I know many placement providers have trialled this model, and it's worked really well, and students have really enjoyed it. They've enjoyed being responsible for a task and really feel like part of the team and one of the team when they've got a little project to work on and they feel like they're making a difference to the team. And so I've just popped some examples of what that project could be. So only a few ideas here, absolutely not exhaustive, but we've got things like patient surveys and evaluations, so patient satisfaction surveys. So I've popped an example here on looking at face-to-face clinics versus remote, particularly post-COVID. We know a lot of our clinics converted to telephone or remote clinics or video clinics, and so actually asking the students to, from start to finish, create and evaluate that service and determine if that's what patients prefer. Do they prefer for your clinic to remain remote over telephone or over video, or would they prefer that we open that clinic back up to be face to face? And so tasking the student to really work on that project, contact service users or patients to get their views and their preferences, and figure out how we can take that service forward and how we might want to adapt that service as needed. Another example could be analysing the hospital menu and working with catering to see if there's any improvements or suggestions that can be made to the hospital menu and catering service. It could be looking at, for example, a snack menu that the hospital offer to support patients needing additional calories and protein, and having a little look at those options on the snacks menu and looking at whether we could adapt them to improve that service and improve what we offer our patients. As mentioned before, it could be doing various different types of audits. As I say, it could be mealtime audits, it could be must audits, record keeping audits, and so the students can be very much involved with gathering information for the audit, analysing that information for the audit, and evaluating that, and providing suggestions and advice on how we could potentially adapt our services going forward to improve outcomes and patient satisfaction. It could also be looking at service development. So I know that some practice placements have utilised this blended learning placement model to create and design a new service within their team. So one example was students developing some group education sessions for oncology patients requiring additional calories and protein to support their recovery through treatment. So again, right from start to finish, looking at what is the need, what is the target audience, what would the patient preferences be? Would they prefer online sessions? Would they prefer in-person sessions? Would they prefer group education sessions or one-to-one sessions? So they looked at that, developing that service, putting together the actual presentations and the PowerPoint presentations and the resources and leaflets, etc. And they created that service and designed that service so that it was ready to pick up and go for the team. So lots of things that the students can get involved with that can really benefit your team as well. So it seems to be sort of mutually beneficial. The students are really able to understand different areas within dietetics, or within the role of a dietitian, should I say, and they are able to sort of have that bit of responsibility and feel like they're really making a difference and making an impact to the team. And actually it does. It allows your team to improve their service and improve what they're offering. So very mutually beneficial, and really good feedback from this model that's been used in the past as well. Okay, and as well as this blended learning placement, we're also piloting what we call alternative or hybrid placements as well within dietetic practice-based learning. And so we're very much utilising what we call PIVO placements, so private, independent and voluntary organisations. So that includes social care, it includes public health, it includes primary care networks, it includes industry, and as I say, we tend to label these as hybrid placements, and essentially it's still including clinical dietetics, but it's heavily involving an alternative career area for dietitians. So these are just some of our examples that we're piloting with our students at the moment. So we're looking at students, for example, being out in industry on placement for 4 days of the week, and then 1 day of the week they will be within clinical practice, so running a clinic, being on the ward, etc. So very heavily involved within industry. Majority of the time will be within that industry style placement, and for this example it's looking at clinical trials for allergies. So we'll have 2 students piloting this placement with the University of Chester. So they'll be, as I say, in industry for 4 days of the week, and 1 day of their placement per week they will be within clinical, to make sure that they're still meeting those competencies from a clinical dietetics point of view and a consultation point of view, but very much a very adapted hybrid style dietetic placement. We've also got some students going out in what we call full-time social care placements. So they'll be going to a nursing home or a care home for their full placement, and they will be allocated a long-arm supervisor. So the long-arm supervisor will be a dietitian, and they will oversee anything clinical. So if they're wanting to assess a patient and provide dietetic advice and put a dietetic care plan in place, they will gather information, they will come up with some ideas and a bit of a plan as to what they think they would like to do, and then they will run that past their long arm supervisor to ensure that their practice is safe and effective. So again, very much an adapted hybrid style placement. We've also got some students that are going to be piloting a placement where it's a bit of a blended style. So they're going to be within clinical practice 3 days a week, and 2 days of the week they're going to be working on a project within student engagement at the University of Chester with our chaplaincy. So they're going to be working with community teams and community sort of charities and organisations to promote nutrition and healthy eating to university students. So again, a really exciting sort of blended hybrid placement that we're going to be piloting there. And I think that we'll see dietetic practice placements really adapting and starting to incorporate more of these PIVO style environments for our learners. And finally, just to have a little look at some of the benefits of these alternative placement styles for our learners. So as I've mentioned, these blended practice placements and these hybrid placements where students are or learners are out in alternative areas alongside clinical practice means that we're freeing up time in our NHS trusts and in our NHS trust teams to potentially take on more dietetic students. You know, for example, we might have one student that is out in industry, or is out in primary care, or is out in social care for half the week, whilst the other student is in the trust, and then they might swap for the other half of the week. So you, as I say, only ever have the equivalent of one student with you each day over the week, but you've actually increased your placement capacity to 2. It's just that you're swapping the students round with those blended learning projects or with those hybrid style placements. So hopefully helping us to support that NHS long-term workforce plan of increasing our dietetic learners and increasing our dietitians out in practice as well. It should hopefully also help to reduce pressures on our NHS trusts. So if we can support our learners to go out into alternative environments or to work on a project for part of the week, it allows you to have a bit of breathing time and to not feel like you've got a student with you constantly, which I know can be really quite overwhelming and tiring at times. It also encourages that active learning. It encourages students to take responsibility for their learning. It gives them that ownership of a project or of an area for them to really focus on and put their time into, and to really problem solve and work on that either by themselves or in a pair or in a small group working on that project. It also, of course, teaches our learners all of the different skills and knowledge that we need to be able to work as an effective dietitian, and practice as an effective dietitian. So they're not only learning that clinical aspect of dietetics, they're really seeing what that full role of a dietitian might involve and entail, looking at audit, service evaluation, etc., or looking at alternative areas that they can work within. So acknowledging that clinical dietetics and working within a hospital or in a community setting isn't the only career for a dietitian. We could potentially also work in a lot of other areas as well. And so it introduces our students to those career opportunities as well as our clinical dietetics. Okay, so that brings us to the end of today's bite-sized session. Thank you so much for listening. As mentioned, you have 5 online bite-sized sessions to complete prior to coming along to our in-person training session. So please can I encourage you to have a listen through each of these videos and make some notes, and then to come along to our in-person session with some ideas and discussion points so that we can support you to lead our learners and be lead educators for our learners whilst they're out on placement for you. If you do have any questions or concerns, please don't hesitate to get in touch, but otherwise we look forward to seeing you at our in-person training session soon. Thank you.